All right, Lammy, here we go again. I'm excited about this one. I want to talk to you about a questionnaire that I've put together. You answered one question of a questionnaire that I pulled off of the internet a long time ago in one of our, first 10 episodes or something. Since then, I've built a questionnaire partly based on that, and I'm going to start using it actually to interview gamers about why they play, what they get out of it, what they learn from it, how addictive gaming can be, and what gets them to come back to a particular game or to start a new one. There's a lot of other questions in there, and I'm actually looking to not just ask you these questions, but to get some feedback from you and to see if there's any questions you would add to this list. So let's just get right into it. So the first question that I have on the list, and this is a work in progress, is when did you first start playing games, video games that you remember?
For me, I think it would have been when I was maybe around 9 years old, 8 or 9. I think more about 9. But I didn't ever have my own console. I guess it depends whether you count like solitaire on a computer. I do remember a time before that when I had a particular friend of my mother's who introduced me to solitaire on a PC, and that I played that, and I was probably 6 or 7 years old or something. But I don't think I ever played a true sort of console video game until I was maybe around 9, and it kind of exploded with um, Nintendo. I was trying to remember if it was Super Nintendo or what it was at the time. I know there was some Sega games that were really exciting because they were totally different and a different console. Um, but yeah, I would have been around that age, and it was all at friends' places. I was an immigrant, and the idea I didn't even consider that I could ask to have my own games or anything. It was just like, okay, friends had these toys. They were just other toys, really, right?
Totally, that's my recollection too. That games were toys. That they were an extension of what else is in your bin when you go over to someone's house or you have them over at your place. I remember you've talked about this before about how watching other people play games for you is something that has great precedent. A lot of people say, "Why would you watch other people play video games?" But for you, it makes sense. This is what you've been doing since you were a kid. Um, what was the first game you remember? So Solitaire, I think, is actually a good answer. I think that's a perfectly legitimate computer game. People spend tons of time playing Solitaire on their computers. What's other than Solitaire? What's the first game you remember playing?
Seriously remember playing in that. I got excited about it, and we played quite a bit, and my best friend at the time wasn't allowed to play. Her parents were quite strict and religious, and this was a no for her. Was Tekken 3. But I don't know if that would have been, yeah, the first one. Um there might have been, I know there was, so on Sega, I think. Oh, and I could be totally wrong about this, but I feel like it was Sonic. They have that's on Sega, right? I'm
Yeah.
not
Oh,
totally
absolutely.
wrong
Yeah.
about that.
I remember being Sonic was to Sega what Mario was to Nintendo.
Exactly. And the truth is, I don't know if I played it, so maybe I can't say Sonic, but I do remember that that was the game that somebody had on their Sega system. And of course, there would have been Mario. And yeah, I think honestly, it might have been Tekken. I'm trying to think if there was something else that I actively remember playing, but it was probably Mario that would have come first. But I have much stronger memories of specifically actively playing Tekken 3, and like playing it to the point where I was gaming. Like that was actual, it was now a thing that I was coming back to and trying to get better at, and had, you know, things I was working on with it, as opposed to a bit more of a, oh hey, look at this blue guy that spins around.
Yeah, that was me with Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3. Is like I would get into it and I would get good and I would compete with other people. And I was cheap. Like I was really good at just waiting, like either jumping and kicking and jumping and kicking and jumping and kicking to frustrate them until they did the same, and then I would just uppercut them. It was my favorite combination. And then a good player would cream me because that's not a skill. That's just being cheap and having good timing with your finger. Okay, so the next question, some of these questions, Lammy, are going to be ones that we've talked about before in depth. So don't feel like you need to answer it thoroughly, because the next one we talk about all the time. what sort of games do you play today?
Yeah, so I think it's almost better and easier answered by what sort of games I don't play. Um, I mean, I play some puzzle platformers, some exploration games, puzzle games, story-based single-player games, MOBAs. Um, but what I really, really don't play is I've never really played like shooters. Just isn't anything that I've played, whether it's online or single player. Really, hasn't really been my jam. Much more rarely, sort of that third person, adventure RPG type game. AAA, real photorealistic isn't really the kind of thing I typically play. A lot of indie games, anything quirky and weird that has a very clear ending, or the exact opposite, which is a highly replayable sort of roguelike adventure that is more about, just getting better and better and learning playing.
Okay, perfect. How often do you play? Specifically, like how long do you play each week? What time generally? Yeah.
It varies fairly greatly throughout the year or throughout the years. But as I've mentioned before, I struggle to have a play session longer than 3 hours. Usually, about 1 to 3 hours at a time is what I manage. Very rarely less than an hour. Like there's almost no point bringing up a game if I don't have that much time. And how often really, really depends. I've had times of my life where I was, depending if I'm like really invested in a game, where I'll pick it up almost every day, right, and put in that 1 to 3 hours. But if I don't have something I'm currently playing and I have other things I'm doing, I could go weeks without really interacting or engaging with the game at all.
Okay. Next question: do you live stream for others? And if so, which I know you have, and I don't know if you still do very often, but I know you have. Does this improve the experience of gaming for you when you stream, or does it detract from the experience?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have streamed. I feel very called out as I feel very guilty about the fact that I haven't in, I don't know, like 2 years or something now.
Sorry, I didn't mean to call you out. I was just like, I don't think she streamed for a while, but yeah, sorry. There's no call out. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, I know.
Yeah.
It's my own guilt. It's my own guilt for not doing it more. It's what I will say is it's very difficult and exhausting, and I find that I end up playing way longer than I would otherwise because I feel there's like added pressure. I mean, people talk about that, right? When you're on camera, even if you're not on camera, because I don't think for the majority of the time that I have been, but just you are being watched. Like your voice, what you're doing is being watched, or at least you know that you could be. It's a lot more exhausting, and there is a lot of pressure to kind of keep going. And my experience has been that, yeah, that I end up playing longer than I would have otherwise, and therefore getting a lot more tired and more drained by it. Like to me, streaming is very, very draining. It is also fun. I mean, I do like that performing thing. Like I like that feeling of kind of performing. I think there is a weird thing that I've heard other sort of YouTubers and things talk about, that you feel like if you have, let's say, a really fun play session with a bunch of friends and you're joking around and just having a great time and very funny and all that, and you're not streaming, you feel a bit like it was wasted. Like, oh, had I been, recording this, like we've talked about this before, like, oh no, we didn't hit record. You kind of feel like you missed out on, why can you be so funny and insightful and interesting when the cameras aren't rolling? And there's a bit of FOMO for it as well, which kind of gets in your head. So I think it can, in that sense, I think it can improve, and make it more fun because maybe you're a bit more a bit more, interesting. But it could also be the opposite, where the pressure could make it therefore less fun. I tried for a while to just treat it like, well, if I'm going to play anyway, I might as well throw it on, which is which is true. But yeah, I think honestly, I think it's just a lot more work. Like it's a lot more exhausting, even though you're not doing a lot. It's the mental aspect of knowing that you're now sort of performative. You're now sort of having to be careful about exactly what you say. And I never cared that much about like being good at what I was playing, but I think everybody wants to at least think that there's something interesting to watch if you're streaming, right? So there's that pressure of like, is this at all interesting? Like, why would anybody watch this? So you feel like you have to be funny, because I'm definitely not good at the games. So you can't hang your hat on that. You got to pick something.
Yeah, the few times that I've streamed, I've certainly felt that pressure of, is this interesting? And when I play games, I'll often sit there and stare at the screen for at least a few seconds, if not a few minutes, thinking about it, about what I'm going to do or where I'm going to go, or and that's not entertaining, obviously, for anyone. And I know that this is a skill to talk out what you're thinking. Like, you can stare at the screen as long as you're talking through what you're thinking. But for me, that's not something I'm used to doing. My monologue is internal for a reason. But it's an interesting dilemma, because there is a sort of a performative fun that can come out of it. The flip side to anxiety, that when performance can be invigorating and can make it more engaging for the performer and not just for the spectator. Next question. Are games addictive for you?
Yes and no. I think that I've done a very good job of not letting it completely consume me, even playing very, established addictive games such as World of Warcraft or League of Legends. I still kind of tap out and get just mentally exhausted and want to do something different after that kind of 3-hour mark. But at the same time, I will definitely binge games while they hold my attention. So if it's, something like, especially something that has like a beginning and an end, and has like some interesting mechanic or something to keep me going, I'll definitely, obviously we've talked about Slay the Spire before being almost whatever it was, 700, 800, I don't remember, 900 hours, way more than I expected. And, Binding of Isaac, definitely a few thousand hours, League of Legends, a few thousand hours, but over years and years and years. Usually in the short term, right, there'll be a game that will kind of consume me for a little bit, but I would still say not to the levels that I've seen. Like, I've never done the, 12 hours a day, or even very, very rarely I'll have a game where I'll play it like 5 hours. There was Stardew Valley. I got into it one time, but I find I tend to burn out around the same amount of time. Stardew Valley, I'll start a save, I'll get about 70 hours in, and I'm done. I just, lose the spark. And that's probably to do with something about the gameplay loop, something around that time, like where, the progression, how the game feels around then just isn't interesting to me. But the other thing I mentioned before, I think the reason that I don't get so addicted to games is because I'm more likely to play them if there's a social aspect. Even if the game is single player, the social aspect could just be that I am engaging with other people that are playing the game, and therefore it's keeping it fresh and interesting. And I think if the game doesn't have that, so if I don't have other people, like if there's tons of people that would also be very, very addicted, then maybe I would be more addicted to things longer. But I'm not really at that time in my life where that's something that I want to be doing. And thankfully, it doesn't seem to be grabbing me in that way.
Okay. This next question, I've thought about the wording a bit. Do you think you should play games more or less or about the same as what you currently play?
It's a very interesting question for me to answer right now, because I just went through more than 6 months of essentially not playing video games almost at all, which had been very different from some of the time before that where I'd been playing more. And so I'm tempted to say right now that I should, if anything, play more. Though before I might have answered the exact opposite. I think that it's important. I really enjoy gaming. I still do enjoy gaming. And I think trying to find the balance of how to enjoy this activity, but not have it mean that I'm not doing, other things too. The reason I stopped this year is I picked up another hobby and ended up throwing myself down that rabbit hole. And instead of, it wasn't on purpose, right? But I just ran, like I didn't have as much time and it wasn't a priority. I never prioritized it. Whereas I think gaming becomes the thing I do when I don't have other priorities, which can then become a negative thing because it means I'm not kind of putting effort into other things. And that's why I'm gaming a lot. So it's hard to say more or less. It probably depends on the time, but I would love to find a nice balance where gaming isn't necessarily indicative of other things not going on in my life, but rather it is actually just a wholesome part of what I do in my day-to-day life.
Yeah, a choice to do as opposed to a choice to escape, maybe.
Yes.
That makes perfect sense. I would probably say the same for me. Like I want to carve time out to do something I want to do, as opposed to, oh, I'm tired. I need a break. I'm going to play a game. That's okay. But and it might still have the same function, but the feeling I want to have is, as the word you used is great, is more wholesome. Has a game ever made you laugh out loud?
Yeah, definitely. Lots of them. I think one of the things I love most in drama is actually the comedic writing. My favorite TV shows or movies that are like usually dramas are the dark comedies or the ones that have lots of comedy in them. And so definitely, Outer Wilds has made me laugh out loud at points. Any game with good writing, Disco Elysium, Witcher 3. There's lots of silly, more straight comedy games. I forget what it was called, but it's a silly kind of stick figure game, Western. Totally forget what this game is called, but that one is a complete. The whole game is a comedy piece. A lot of games that have made me laugh.
Has a game ever made you cry?
Yes. Uh, Specifically, Outer Wilds comes to mind again, but out of fear. That one was a pure, as I've talked about it before. Um, I'm sure also just like out of sadness or emotions, but I can't think of a specific example right now. Probably less often for me because, like I say, I don't really play those super, I'm not playing The Last of Us or those kinds of games that would normally, I think, make you cry in that way.
Has a game ever made you decide to change your life?
I don't know if one has. Um, I think again, Outer Wilds probably comes the closest to um, making me learn some important things in terms of getting over fear or the things that you learn in that game that something is scary just because you don't understand it and then you understand it and it's no longer scary and therefore don't be scared of the unknown because it's not necessarily inherently going to be horrifying. But I think those are all things that kind of knew it didn't really, it might have slightly changed the way I view certain things. um, I don't know if any game specifically has impacted me to that level. I will say that playing League of Legends and meeting people through League of Legends that I only know from playing that game and meeting them online has in many ways changed my life. And these are people that I have not yet met in person, but we have talked about plans to meet in person. And I never thought that that was something, that I might actually do or engage with, but making some very good friends who are also very different than me in many ways, and would not have been probably the kind of people I otherwise would have engaged with if it weren't for that game. So in that sense, I think games have changed my life.
So this next question is about learning and education, what a game can teach us or what we can glean from a game about our understanding of the world, other people, whatever. And I haven't quite nailed the question yet because it's I think it's more broad than this. But what have games taught you about the world and other people, if anything? And I think the if anything is a bit silly because how could you not learn something from a game? It's like reading a novel and not learning anything. But yeah.
I think that my answer is probably similar to the previous question for this one, just because, yeah, some of those sort of lessons from playing games. I think another lesson I learned is that I'm maybe a bit more resilient than I would have thought when it comes to hardship, even in a game. So we talked about before that through playing Hollow Knight, which people consider quite punishingly difficult. And lots of people just say it's not worth playing, like it's too hard. Why would you play that? And they compare it to Dark Souls and all of that. And I never would have thought that I would be the kind of person that would play Dark Souls, because it's a game. Why would I want to punish myself over and over for, like, what? You're not really building a real life skill. You know, it's one thing to go through hardship because you're building a skill that is important, that you need to learn, that, you know, is going to have other benefits in your life. But it turns out that bug of like mastering something, which I don't know, maybe that's not a surprise, but I think it was a little bit of a surprise for me that I would do that in the realm of a game where it was something that really wasn't important. Like I am definitely a like person that wants to really succeed, and like I'm an overachiever at things in life, but I wouldn't have thought of it necessarily for games or something that, you know, I don't tend to be an overachiever if I think I'm going to suck, I guess is what I should say, is that, you know, when it came to sports when I was younger and I had just told myself, oh, I'm not like an athlete or a sporty person, so I didn't care. Those were the only realms that I wasn't an overachiever in. I did it. And yeah, I wanted to be good. Of course, I was still competitive, but I wasn't that overachiever that I would have been for everything else. And gaming was the same for me. I didn't think that I was. And just in comparing, like even while doing it, I was like, well, this isn't really a big deal. And I would talk to other people that would just sort of give up. And I guess learning that I wasn't giving up, even though I had no reason not to, taught me a bit about myself and reframed a little bit of where I fit in the realm of gaming.
Yeah, it's something we've chatted about before, that for you, gaming and learning is closely linked with identity and growth and discovery of your own self, which is fascinating and I think so relatable for so many people, including me today. Okay, so the next set of questions are rapid fire. So these can be yes or no or just a quick answer. Most of them are based on preferences. Do you prefer games that ask you to imagine or ones that kind of give you everything up front? In other words, do you want games to have everything on the screen or ones that ask you to build something yourself in your own mind, whether that's reflected back into the game or not?
I don't know how to answer this question. I don't know. I think I want to say the imagination one, but I'm afraid that it isn't true and that I actually prefer the other. But then I'm like, I actually don't know if that's true either. Am I just being hard on myself because I think the imagination one has more value? I honestly don't know. I would need examples of each and I could say which I prefer. I do tend to think that I like information presented on screens in terms of menus and things like that. I don't like to be forced into an experience. In terms of UX, I like the power in my hands. However, I love subtleties in games or movies or media. I don't want to be told what, like, I like when there's subtext. So, but to me, that's still told. It's not, you're not imagining it. Like the author had, you know, the creator had an idea. They're just not spelling it out for you. I do prefer that. So I don't know.
It's tricky, right? Because there are games that in and of themselves can have both. They can offer everything to the player, but still encourage you to imagine something. So, you know, the classic Civilization series of games, everything you need is on the screen. You don't have to imagine this. It's all of the choices you make are right in front of you. They're giving you the historical analysis of what's going on. But you are encouraged also to go, if you want, you don't have to imagine what this means as you're building your empire and how this would look on the ground, something that the game does not give you. And I think maybe some people go back and forth between the two, which is interesting for the next question, which I think can be the same thing. Usually, do you play games that wind you up? So action, timers, quick motions, mechanics, or wind you down? Things that require patience, planning, no time limits. I think we get it. Like a wind up game for me would be Slay the Spire, probably, where I'm getting into it. And a wind down game would be something like a toy, like Townscaper, where I'm just painting the landscape, or City Skylines. Yeah.
Uh, Again, I think I'm pretty split. I think I play both. And it just depends on my mood. I definitely, so I don't really usually like timed things. That really stresses me out and winds me up too much. But I really do enjoy, mechanically complicated games. So even I don't really enjoy timed challenges because I like to have enough time, like, because I'm bad. I want to have enough time to get it. But I do enjoy mechanically difficult things. Like I'll try something over and over again till I get it, or I'll keep playing it to get better over time. I really do enjoy League of Legends and other sort of like action arcade games. But I also play, a lot of completely like take as long as you need to figure this out, or I play Animal Crossing, pure sim games as well that I truly enjoy. So honestly, I don't I don't think I favor one over the other.
Okay. I think we might have addressed this before, but turn-based or real-time?
Yeah, and that's where I would say turn-based in general, unless, there's the League of Legends example where obviously it's real time because that's the nature of the beast. But I think in general, and I think it's just maybe changed over time. Maybe nowadays I'm enjoy real time more, but I think it's just that like I used to like the Final Fantasies and those RPGs, and lately I'm starting. Like, I think I find those more boring now than I used to. Maybe it's just seeing that they're not innovating and it's always the same, and therefore the turn based is like, well, okay, why?
Right. Okay. Okay. Same thing. Preference. Typical console, PC, or phone, tablet, mobile device.
That one I could say pretty clearly. I do, even though I play the majority of my gaming being League of Legends on a desktop, I think I prefer console gaming. It has that intentionality that we spoke of. I spend all my time on my computer, and playing sitting down on a console on a couch just feels so indulgent to be able to couch play like that and sit down and know that I'm now playing a video game.
Single player, multiplayer.
Another hard one. I do like single player games. I find that they're often better games, just in terms of like really enjoying those story games, and those tend to be single player. But as I said, gaming is a highly social action for me. So in that sense, multiplayer games. But I will caveat and say, unless this is a question coming up, but multiplayer cooperative, like something where there's a team aspect, even if there's competition, I prefer to be working together with other people. I don't like just me against somebody else.
Yeah, that was the next question. Perfect. Okay. Open world or on the rails?
If the rails are good, then rails are good. Otherwise, I do like me some open world.
Okay. AAA or indie?
Indie.
Story or action?
Again, I think it depends a little bit how good the action is, like how good the mechanics of the game are, and how good the story is. But I mean, story usually, because if I'm playing a story game, it's probably because the story is renowned for being great and the writing is renowned for being great.
Okay, so the next question is something we've talked about many times before, and it's just a fascination of mine, and I have no idea how to make this quick, but is a good game art or entertainment? And if it's both, does it lean towards one or the other when you play?
Mm. So art isn't entertainment then in your...
No, I think that they can go together, obviously, but I'm asking the question to, to churn up answers that might be controversial or interesting or provocative. If we were to have to divide them, how do we respond to that? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like 90% of my gaming is entertainment, and the 10% that is art is much more impactful. And yeah, and therefore even if it's only 10% of time spent or, of titles tried, it's much more impactful overall, and is one of the reasons that I want to continue gaming. And like I said, I want gaming to be a part of my life. Worthwhile art.
Okay. Even more rapid fire. This is a scale of 1 to 10. How important are aesthetics? 1 being not important at all, 10 being as important as it gets.
Aesthetics meaning just straight graphics, or aesthetics meaning atmosphere?
I think aesthetics meaning anything that an artist was called in to do. So sound design, music, visual design, everything except for the story.
Yeah. And 10.
Okay, perfect. Story.
10. Everything's going to be 10.
Character.
Your own character, or
Let's say both. Let's say like the way in which characters are built and described. But I guess you should separate them. That's a good point. Okay.
Or like, is it story, right? Is that part of writing and story, or is it part of...
No, I'm going to separate character from story. So let's say, how important is your character to be fully fleshed out? Like, how important is that as a thing to be focused on?
3.
And other characters? NPCs?
7.
7.
7.
Okay. Mechanics.
10. But the thing with the mechanics and the writing and the aesthetics is that it's like at least one of those things needs to be great. You don't need all of them to be great. So that's why I can't pick one or the other. It depends on the...
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Last one, novelty.
Yeah, that's a 10,000. Give me that one.
Okay.
See, I need to know all to scale them accordingly. I think novelty is number 1 for me.
It's interesting because for me, as someone who's gamed less probably over time, at least in recent years, novelty is less important because there's so much out there that is novel to me. So like a game from 2009 is going to be novel to me. And wow, that's amazing. I can't believe they did that 13 years ago. Okay, last few questions, and then we're going to end it off. What is the most disappointing game you've ever played that you can remember? Something that might have been really revved up for you and then just was a disappointment.
No, I don't tend to engage with media that I'm going to be disappointed by. Like, I have usually a pretty good idea if I'm going to like something or not. And I'm not usually therefore I'm not like, if I start playing something and I don't like it, then I'm not going to play it.
Yeah, and then you wouldn't remember. You probably wouldn't have much memory of something you played for 5 minutes and then just...
Like, I don't know if there was something I was super... Usually, like, there have been games I've talked before about... I forget the name of it. The MMO that was super, super hyped up and it just fizzled and died. But it wasn't because the game wasn't good. So, like, I very much enjoyed the game, but they didn't kind of get their acts together with servers and all of that. So that doesn't really fit the scope. Then there's lots of games that other people really, really want me to play and hype up, but I always kind of knew I wasn't going to be into it. So then when I'm disappointed, it's like, well, I knew I wasn't going to like it. Yeah, I don't know. I think I make up my mind if I'm not going to like something. So then if I play, and then if I make up my mind that I'm going to like it, usually I'm not overly disappointed by it.
Right. No, that makes sense. Okay, last 2 questions. Best, I know this is a stupid question. Best game you've ever played in your current mood as you think today, may change tomorrow, was different yesterday. Best game you've ever played.
Outer Wilds.
Okay, obviously. Any game you have on your either real or digital shelf that you are excited to play next and have been maybe putting off? Like, what's next? If you could have time tomorrow or today to play, what would be next to play?
Outer Wilds DLC. I still haven't played. I'm going for a different game. And there isn't anything I'm really, really excited about right now. That isn't a game I've already played. Yeah, there isn't really anything right now. Like I said, I haven't been in a very gaming sort of mood.
Okay. No, that's totally fair. Okay, that's the end of the questionnaire. what do you think is missing from that? Like what didn't we talk about in that questionnaire?
Maybe could ask if you're chatting with people and interviewing to get some interesting stories. You could just ask about people's maybe most memorable sort of gaming experiences, um, like just a story of something really memorable, or you could go for the super cliche sort of what was a time that you overcame an obstacle in a game and how did that go, or um, for me, an interesting story, something that I come back to is, what are some friendships or relationships that have grown out of gaming, and how do you manage, like, how do those relationships work as you get older, maybe have a bit less time to engage with it.
Okay, no, those are great. That's actually a couple holes that you've identified that I'm going to rectify. Lammy, this has been great. I've learned a lot actually for all the times that we've talked about gaming and the hours now we've spent. There's a lot of information there that feels new, and that would maybe be fertile ground to explore further in the future. But yeah, we'll see you next time. I don't know what we'll chat about, but maybe it's one of these points that we've just done in this questionnaire. Unless you've got something that you're dying to address.
No, not at the moment. We'll just have to get together and see what comes up.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you. See you next time.
See you next time.